Hello. Hello, good evening, and so lovely to thank you very much. I've hardly said anything, but welcome everyone. It's so wonderful to see a packed house at the Ujazdowski Castle, and for Culture Tensions. I'm really pleased about this, the panel that we have and the speakers that we have on as our special guests. Just a quick bit of background about Culture Tensions. This is the third of the series this year. We had 6 discussions last year, and it's co-curated by myself and Agnieszka Kolek, who's the deputy director here, and we'll hear more from her in a minute. But it's a great pleasure that the Ujazdowski has given us this space to have these very nuanced and complex and sometimes difficult conversations. What I hope is that we can hear each other and we can have a meaningful dialogue, and of course disagreement is welcome, but that we can do so within a civil and a civilized and civil manner. So you will have a chance to ask questions from our guest speakers, and also to have an opportunity to air your own thoughts and reflections. So tonight's discussion is on art and the new authoritarianism. Of course, we probably all know about authoritarian thinking and how that is used, or how the arts and culture is used to be a tool and a weapon sometimes by regimes. We have seen that in the former Soviet Union, in Russia, we see that in China, we see that in Iran, and we shall hear more about that soon. But we also see it in the West, and while liberal democracies will champion diversity of thought and free expression and freedom of artistic thought, artistic expression as well as freedom of speech, we are seeing that increasingly undermined in the West. Perhaps not driven by government, but perhaps by our own peers and colleagues. So that's something that's, is worrying, that civility and diversity of thoughts and beliefs and opinions are increasingly untolerated. That's just food for thought. We will have a really interesting range of opinions from our speakers. We haven't got much time, and 2 hours does go fast, believe me. So I'm going to introduce our guest speakers. So first, just to introduce my co-curator, Agnieszka Kolek. Agnieszka is not only deputy director here, but she's also the co-founder of a very brave festival that started in London called the Passion for Freedom Festival, which gave a platform and exhibitions to artists who spoke about free expression, who made work that would perhaps be censored, perhaps be silenced, and artists who were in danger of their lives. And Agnieszka, as an example of that, she organized a discussion in Copenhagen in 2015.
I was invited.
Sorry, to being corrected there. Agnieszka was invited to give a talk at a discussion in Copenhagen in 2015 on the subjects of art and blasphemy. It was attacked by terrorists, and there were fatalities or injuries. But Agnieszka bravely said, if they're trying to silence us, we need to continue to talk. Therefore, we should continue the discussion, even when they were under attack. So I think that's a very pertinent experience for tonight's discussion. Our second speaker, and I'm so delighted to say hello remotely to Taravat Talepasand. Hello, welcome virtually to Poland, to Warsaw. Taravat is actually in San Francisco, and she's 2 days away from hanging her exhibition, which she'll be talking about, because that very exhibition was censored in Minnesota at a very well-known college, because it may upset and offend some of the students. So we'll hear more about that. But Taravat is an artist, activist, as well as an educator. And her labor-intensive interdisciplinary painting practice questions the normative cultural behaviors within contemporary power imbalances. As an Iranian-American woman, Talepasand explores the cultural taboos that reflect on gender and political authority. Her approach to figuration reflects the cross-pollination, or lack thereof, in our Western society. After Taravat speaks, we will hear from Ignacy Czwartos. Forgive my Polish pronunciation, and I'm looking forward to seeing your exhibition tomorrow at the Zamek National Gallery of Art, where he has a major solo exhibition. So if you haven't seen that, please do go and see it. And I'm looking forward to that. But Ignacy is a Polish artist, and he has had exhibitions across Poland at other key galleries and museums, including the MOCAK Museum of Contemporary Art in Krakow. His work deliberately references European modernism, especially the aesthetics of Malevich and Piet Mondrian. And thanks to combining his figurative and abstract art, there is a sort of perverse witticism in his work. Ignacy, his recent paintings are composed of a homage to the cursed soldiers of Poland, and they valorize the heroism and their fight against what was communist rule in Poland at the time, and the really important and significant role that they played in Polish history. Which seems to have been ignored and sometimes criticized by the contemporary art world, and we'll hear more about that. Then our final speaker is Kaja Szulczewska. Welcome, Kaja. And we're in a Polish majority for the first time in our Culture Tension series, so that's wonderful that we have three Polish speakers. So Kaja is an influencer, very active on social media, and she's a blogger and a writer. She's written a brilliant essay for a big magazine, the Ujazdowski Cultural Journal, and it's worth reading if you haven't done so. But a bit more about Kaja. She's also one of the first promoters of body positivity in Poland, and is the founder of the community project, well, in English, Body Positive. In 2019, and I can relate to this, she became a victim of cancel culture because of her public criticism of the sex industry and her opposition to gender identity politics and transgender ideology, and we'll hear more about that in her presentation. So each speaker's got approximately 20 minutes to talk and about these themes, and then there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. We will, of course, have a conversation between us. If I ask you to let the speakers do their presentation first, and then we'll get back to you. We will not ignore you. Thank you. So we move on to Agnieszka.
Thank you. So first, I will start without images. Zacznę bez prac. Being aware that we treat freedom like air, we only notice it when we begin losing it. After moving to London 20 years ago, being young and naive, I treated freedom as if it was here and that it would always be there. I was free and careless. I made friends with people from all over the world, among them with Iranians, and especially Iranian women. They're really powerful ladies. Through contact with them, I fell in love with the Iranian cinema. Especially here, Jafar Panahi's movies moved me deeply, The Circle and Offside. The Offside movie actually shows a group of young women, young Iranian girls, disguising themselves as boys to sneak into the stadium to watch the World Cup match. Ignacy might relate to that because he's a football fan, so he knows how important it is to go and support your team. Because women are forbidden to attend sports events where the men are taking part in these sport events. The director was convicted for the propaganda against the regime and is under house arrest since 2010, and he is forbidden to make films. I was invited to a protest against secret Sharia courts in Britain in front of Downing Street in 2010. These courts operate according to Islamic law that discriminates against women, and this is done in secret. During the protests, and now we can have a first image, please. These are my drawings afterwards. I used the images that I managed to find on private photographers' blogs. So it was not published in the press. So being there during the protest, there was a counter-protest by the group of radicals led by Anjem Choudhury. He's a well-known figure in Britain for starting different radical groups, and when they were made illegal, they were restarting them again under a different name. And over the years, he inspired his members to commit acts of terror. One of the most shocking and well-known ones is the one of beheading of Lee Rigby in Woolwich in East London in 2013. So the group was very aggressive. Can we have the next slide, please? The group was very aggressive, and they were separated from us by 2 police vans. We were a group of women, and they were all men. And there were many photojournalists present. We can have the next one, please. Next day, there were no reports of it in the press. I started to question myself, what else is there that I'm blissfully unaware of? Because having this experience, seeing what's happening and what kind of a threat we're facing, especially as women, and then in general as a society, I was shocked that there is no reports of that, no mention, no conversation in an open society, democratic society that we claim to be living in. So after that, I joined Passion for Freedom, first as a curator, and soon I became its founder. Next slide, please. So we were all working voluntarily over the years. We focus on raising awareness and giving voice to artists who otherwise would not be able to show their work. Next slide, please. The main reason for them being sidelined at the time was that the fear of violence or a potential loss of sponsorship from companies linked with foreign regimes. And I always find it fascinating how when we see different group of activists doing different things in public. So for example, in London, the Extinction Rebellion, and seeing how much money goes into the production of the event, then I was wondering where is the money coming from, because we were struggling over the years to produce the festival because everyone was scared to give money because somehow through the business, global business, they would be connected to these regimes. So can you pass me the slide because I can help with the slides to be quicker. So for me, it was fascinating to see the production of Extinction Rebellion in the streets blocking the traffic in London, and then being aware how over the so many years of Passion for Freedom in London, we would struggle to get the donations, and mainly it was done by different friends. Here is an artist originally from Russia. She's creating a collage work showing how people were being erased during the Soviet state, how they were not only erased by being sent to gulags, but also the history of family was being erased. And I think that's something that it seems we can relate to now with what's going on with the cancel culture. So at the time, we were asking 3 questions. What is freedom? How easy is it to lose it? And how hard is it to get it back? Over the years, we showed a range of works about censorship in Russia, works hoping to break the taboos in the Islamic world, or highlight the treatment of women in the Western countries while they're being treated according to Islamic law. And more, we had artists submitting works which clearly trod close to or over the newly imposed lines that secular, ostensibly free Western societies have begun to exert upon themselves. The fear of offense, the right to have one's own feelings protected, the safe spaces. And that now and again we are being told that our freedom is worth nothing, and we should never be proud of who we are and what our own roots, our history tells about us. So in 2018, we asked, what is freedom, how to celebrate it, and how to preserve it? Since then, the threats to freedom have only intensified. We are not only facing external threats of foreign regimes or Islamic radicals within our own countries, but also we face an authoritarian revolution sweeping our institutions and public services. Especially you see that in Britain and the United States. In 2020, Joe Bartosz approached Passion for Freedom in London to discuss an idea of a group show of women artists questioning the gender ideology and its effect on services for women and protection of children. No gallery was ready to stage such a show due to the threats of violence. We are responsible for our freedom to be maintained. Our words and daily actions create our reality. Most people wish to be safe and do not dare to question dogmas when faced with the threat of violence or losing their livelihood. Those who protect freedom are always outnumbered. Their spirit is so strong and the inspiration that they bring to the society so powerful that despite everything, they always win. Being fearless brings joy and connects us with others. I am delighted to be on this panel as our guests are truly inspiring and heroic and fearless. Thank you.
Thank you, Agnieszka. We'll move on to Taravat. How are you? Can you hear us? Hello? Oh, we can't hear you. We can see you.
Can you all hear me?
We can hear you now. Welcome.
Okay, you can hear me now. Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And there's a little bit of an echo, so I apologize if you all hear an echo as well. I'm here in San Francisco. I'm at YBCA, Yerba Buena Center of the Arts. You can kind of see right here that I have my neon Woman, Life, Freedom in Farsi and in English. That's part of the installation, and to the right side of my shoulder here is part of the gallery entrance for the exhibition. I'm very excited to be speaking to all of you in Warsaw, Poland. I have a soft spot for Polish people. My husband and our kids share the DNA. So thank you all for having me. I have a presentation. May I share that
Please.
Right now?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, great. Can you all see the presentation?
Yep, we can see it. It's on
you can see the
yeah.
Of in a hijab, and it says Taravat?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Okay. So growing up Iranian within America, because I am first generation, so I was born in the US at the time of the 1979 revolution, so that's the year that I was born. What happened was my father received education here in the United States, which was an opportunity for my mother to tell my father, we are moving to America. We are not staying in the country of Iran because a revolution is happening and there is a control with the regime in the Islamic Republic. And so luckily, that is why I am here in the United States. But growing up Iranian in America had been arduous and awkward. As a whole, we as Iranians had little consciousness of assimilation because of a constant denial of our permanence in America. In Iran, I found myself to be transgressive, yet within American culture, being Iranian is transgressive in that American individualism and Iranian deference to tradition were irreconcilable. Traveling down one of those paths meant turning your back on the other, even if the defiance was temporal. This was the hidden catch of the formation of my identity. The contradictions caused my head to constantly bounce around the question of inherent identity, that which is exterior and self-defined versus inward and predetermined. I believe that to create art, it is imperative for me to be vulnerable, extracting the personal truths driven by my diaspora, history, nostalgia, self-awareness, and rebellion. Much of my work revolves around the struggles of womanhood and navigating personal identity as a hyphenated individual. However, I believe that art must possess an element of vulnerability in order to provoke change socially, intellectually, and morally. In a world where ideas of culture, political, and intellectual activities are evolving, what will this change mean for generations to come? I also want to share the short essay by Dr. Jordan Amirkhani here in the United States from my exhibition that was at McAllister College in Minnesota that happened at the end of January of this year, 2023, and it was exhibited through March. During this time, unfortunately, after a few days of this exhibition being open, a couple of Somali Muslim female students felt hurt and offended by some of the works in my exhibition and wrote a letter demanding that the works be removed and that my show be canceled. After the conversations with these students, the institution, or I would say gallery director, provost of the institution, thought that it was a good idea to hang black curtains over all of the windows. Which, of course, I thought was absurd because I had a neon of woman life freedom in the exhibition that they literally put a veil over. So this was a very uncomfortable situation for me, but also a big learning experience in that it asked me to really think about the position and where we are right now, in that this younger generation is feeling that their voices are being heard and they're being able to speak up and speak out, which I support. So I have some sort of sympathy for these students that had these feelings. But at the same time, as an artist, I feel like it is important for artists to create work and be able to have that freedom of expression. And the works that were questioned were made over a decade ago. And so back then, I wasn't being provoked or being kind of talked back at for the work. And so it's really interesting that that's happening now. So I would really love to read just parts of the essay in which I will have images that will kind of follow along. Sometime in mid-October 2022, just 5 weeks into the nationwide protests that continue to unfold in Iran in response to the killing of Gina Amini, a mural-sized propaganda poster appeared in Valisir Square in downtown Tehran, depicting a crudely manipulated assemblage of prominent Iranian women outfitted in the mandatory hijab alongside the Islamic Republic of Iran's favorite current slogan, "Women of Our Land." Within hours of the poster's unveiling, calls for its removal from the public sphere by the women in the image and or their allies began. Feminist novelist Simone Danchnavar called not just for its removal, but its burning. Parvana Khozemi, one of the only Iranian women who has climbed Mount Everest, posted on Instagram that, quote, "the name and image of us women are only used by the Islamic Republic of Iran for abuse." Actor Fatimeh Motabed uploaded a video to multiple social media platforms stating, quote, "I am a mother of all children who were killed in this land, not a woman in the land of murder killers." The screenwriter Alidata Mekotuni pointed out that one of the women depicted in the image The photojournalist Nushin Jafari is currently serving a prison sentence in Edinburgh for, quote, insulting state sanctities.
Sorry, if we could just stop for a minute. We're having an issue with sound. I don't know if it's just a bit of an echo. So
I don't know, it's like cutting end of the words.
Yeah, sort of it's glitching.
Maybe if it's slower, then it will be all right for the microphone. I don't know. It's just cutting words somehow.
Let's see how we get on.
I can hear the echo too. I apologize.
That's okay.
Okay. So it's like an internet connection. Maybe just slower.
Okay. Maybe just speak a little bit slower, but it's connectivity. Sorry to disturb you. Carry on. Yeah.
Just a bit slower because it seems cutting.
Yeah.
I'll go slower.
Thank you.
By nightfall, the poster had disappeared. A reflection of what journalist Abbas Abdi observed on Twitter as the regime's, quote, contradictory and blocked sensibilities to undermine and co-opt Iranian women's struggles in the name of morality policing. I'm gonna kind of jump forward a little bit here. We must continue to make, build, create, paint, write, post, pray, share, shout, and stomp for the Iranian people's freedom, for intergenerational justice, for the dead scattered in the wake of this 40-year political storm, for the travesties that line the road to a future of something else. It will not always be like this. It will never be like this again. And so I'm sharing with you some images that have been controversial. Here is a painting of the first Ayatollah Khomeini. And this was a painting that I did myself that I swore I never would paint this man's face. But at the time of the sanctions, I was really focusing on the Iranian currency and looking at the beauty of what currencies that we find in different countries, but the stories that they tell. And the image of him I had used, and this is actually an appropriation of not only the image of him and the Iranian currency, but this was a poster that I found torn and worn of Mao in China when I was visiting China in the early 2000s. So I kind of grouped the two together because I'm very interested in finding similarities between cultures, both Western and Eastern. So it's sometimes, oftentimes, these similarities are taboo and are a result of things that one would not maybe even make a connection as a similarity. These are two paintings of myself, portraitures, where I painted myself as these relics, as these sculptures, literally objectifying myself, but really questioning what the veil means, how it's worn, how it can be worn, and also having it worn at the same time with showing the body, concealing the body, broken pieces, oil painted on my face, finding all these different ways of talking about why there are these controversies that are happening in the Middle East, maybe not specifically with Iran, but between the West and the East. And these two pieces are painted with hash oil. So I'm very interested in using materials as well, other than just the paints that I use, that are, again, finding those similarities. Hash is something that is easily found in Iran and also just culturally really acceptable to smoke, like opium, whereas in the United States at the time, it was deemed inappropriate and illegal at that time. It wasn't legalized yet in California and in other states as it is now today. And so on the right, I had burned the Iranian currency of the face of Khomeini, but using the hash oil similar to watercolor by every layer, giving you a slightly darker variation of that color. And onto the left, that's a portrait of myself. So I'm really having this conversation of what it means to be a woman, what it means to be objectified, to be looked at, to have this kind of gaze. These two drawings are one of the few pieces that were actually questioned in my exhibition in Minnesota at Macalester College. So what you see here is two graphite drawings of a woman wearing a burqa and being, well, I guess you could say, sexually provocative, being very open, being empowered. And that's really the baseline of my work. It is wanting to show how women can be empowered and be from that part of the world. But what these students unfortunately didn't really look further into the context and information that I provided with the title and information next to these drawings on the wall is that this is based on an Iranian writer who was born in Iran, raised in a Muslim family, and wrote a book, a memoir about her sexual assault as a child in Iran. She lives in London today, and after reading this book, I was so moved by it because she was so open at talking about her own sexual trauma in Iran, in a Muslim household. I reached out to her and had many conversations and actually asked if I had consent to using her image in my work as drawings or paintings. She sent me these photographs, which are also included in her book. So it's already publicly viewed online or in her book. And again, I had made these about over a decade ago and had exhibited it widely in the United States and in Europe and never had any kind of pushback regarding this collection. And also the title is called Blasphemy. So I knew at that moment of conceptualizing this project that this was going to have the title Blasphemy really kind of leads you into the direction of what I'm talking about. And this had now become a problem with a younger generation of Muslims here in the United States, which I think is really interesting because since 9/11, right, we had a very different kind of perception of Islamic community in the United States. But now I'm finding that certain institutions and museums are limiting artists, particularly women from the Middle East, in showing work like this because they fear Islamophobia. So it's very interesting for me to see this shift and change within 20 years or over the last 20 years. I also painted this ransom note, which I had actually made during the time in the United States where women were really fighting for their bodily autonomy, right, and being able to have a choice in their own pregnancies. And having it pink, having it say, fuck this shit, was kind of a sentiment in this kind of connecting the kind of consciousness and feelings that people were having, not only during COVID, but also during this fight for bodily autonomy, and also how this can work in what is happening with the protests and the fight in Iran today. I had also this long rug of Trump crying over and over and over again, and which this rug, the story about it is actually, I had this made in Iran in 2018 while Trump was president. And I actually had to smuggle it out of the country because the people that made this rug in Iran feared that in the airport I would get stopped and it would lead them back to them making it and have them get in some sort of trouble. And I didn't even know that the image of Trump was actually seen as being blasphemous in Iran. And so that became a bit more of a social practice for me, right? Taking myself and my body into a country which I had not visited over 11 years and making work there and knowing that I was actually having to bring it back into the United States to exhibit it to the public here. These are the sculptures that were also included in the exhibition in Macalester College, Minnesota. And this also was what really quote unquote, hurt and frightened the Muslim students. They feared that when people viewed these images, the sculptures and drawings, that people would think, looking at them with hijabs, that they would project and objectify them as well. When in fact, I was creating this, again, over a decade ago, as relics of how women at the time were being seen. If we would fast forward into the future and something that we would find in the ground and on earth and be like, this is a part of how women were being dressed and being seen. And also to have a correlation conversation between the first sculpture of a woman in our history that we learn of is the Venus of Willendorf, which in my opinion is a quite voluptuous and a bodily form of what a woman should or was praised to look like. And so this was kind of my way of bringing that conversation back into, well, what does the burqa mean and how is it worn? But specifically for the breast, talking about the bodily modifications that are also very widely used in the Middle East. And this idea of women being very prone to protecting their body, also doing things underneath the veil that maybe we are not able to see, but that is actually being widely used and done in the Middle East. And here's the neon and a closer view of Woman, Life, Freedom that is behind me right now for this exhibition. And the circular neons at the top are the word sul in Farsi, that means peace. So it's a call for peace, it's a call for equity, it's a call for equality, it's a call for human rights and freedom, not only for women, but also for LGBTQ plus that also reside in Iran, right? We do have queer communities in Iran, trans communities in Iran, and they are just as much at risk as the women are in Iran. And now I'm going to show you selections that I've been collecting and archiving during the protests, where at the left we have young girls in the school really giving the finger to the Ayatollah Khomeini and the current Khomeini as well. And on the right side, what we see women protesting in the United States and also in other countries. So I have this image here of students on the left removing the veil, throwing it up in the air, and then on the right, we have an Iranian woman in New York with her own, participating in a protest with her own poster. These are two women in Iran, one to the left, having the fist in the air, right? Being on this dumpster that's fallen over and the people around her. And it's such a powerful image, as the image on the right is of a woman in Iran, the veil down, having her fingers gesturing the peace sign. And you can see the Iranian police that are kind of marching in front of her. I mean, these women in these images are really putting their lives on the line and at risk. You can see that here in the United States and possibly also in Europe, when we go out into the streets and protest, there are parts of us that are taking a risk, but we also know that we have the freedom to do so, right? We're not going to be hit by police and armor and weapons. But in Iran, it's a very different situation. Women are not allowed to sing, to whistle, to dance, to even have a loud voice outwardly and openly. So to see these images is very empowering for me, and I hopefully it empowers other people outside of Iran to see what these women are actually doing. And the image to the right is really quite lovely. You see a woman who is unveiled, wearing her clothing, not even the jacket that you have to be wearing as well, and having a conversation with an Iranian woman who is veiled, right? And this is about choice. Here we have the same similar imagery where two girls together on the left, one choosing to wear the veil, another choosing not to wear the veil. And on the right side, women together having lunch And the same thing is happening here. So we're not asking for the veil to be ripped off of the heads, we're asking for the choice. And these are some images from the exhibition that was, as you can see, Black Curtains and Veiled at McAllister College. These images were sent to me by faculty and students, and they opened the curtain for me. They opened the curtain to reveal the woman, life, freedom neon. But you can see that it was completely blacked out. And then afterwards, I had asked them to remove the black curtains. They then covered it with frosted decals, saying that they wanted to protect the non-consensual viewing, which to me is absolutely absurd. You can't have non-consensual viewing. You have a choice. You can go into the gallery and see the work, or you don't, right? And so that was really what stuck with me out of this entire exhibition, is that kind of entitlement of non-consensual viewing. And these are posters that were on the front door of the gallery. So as you enter on the left, they had a consent that described my work as being images of sexuality, okay, fine, and violence. I've never considered my work to be violent at all. And so I quickly had them change the language of the consent label. But right next to this, you see the Muslim student community at that school created a poster to be in solidarity, and it says here, help us protest the exhibit that is perpetuating the objectification, fetishization of hijab Muslim women. This is unacceptable. In the spirit of solidarity, do not attend, visit or engage with this exhibit. So I thought that this was extremely offensive to me as the artist, that the school thought it was a good idea to have these two writings and images on the door for visitors before they even are able to enter the space. And my last image is a billboard that I had created in Portland, Oregon, of woman, life, freedom. Because for me, all I want to do is share the space. Even in my exhibition here at YBCA in San Francisco, I have other Iranian artists that are going to be sharing their poetry, their dance, their singing, and their artwork. Because in the end, I can't do this alone. I don't want to do this alone. And I want to have a feeling and a sense of togetherness as much as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Taravat. Thank you. That was really moving, and we stand in solidarity with you and all the women and men who are also fighting against the regime in Iran. And long may freedom of artistic expression continue. And it's worrying that colleges in the USA are censoring work and actually describing your work as violent. My jaw drops. I'm speechless. We'll get back with more questions, but we're going to move on to Ignacy. Thank you again, Taravat. I hope you can hear the Polish speakers. Good, because it won't be translated. So, okay, Ignacy.
Okay, the microphone works, so we can go on. I have prepared a text that I'm going to read. Who is offended by my paintings on the following stages of my journey? Well, my works from late 1990s and the beginning of 2000s were perceived quite well. But despite a couple of exhibitions in an important cities of Poland and good opinions of Jerzy Nowosielski, in spite of that, I didn't achieve a success. An exception was an exhibition in 2006 in Zachęta about Polish paintings of the 21st century. Then nothing spectacular happened as regards my paintings. I was like, it was like I didn't exist. Like people were ignoring me, critics were ignoring me. I was thinking that maybe my work is like out of fashion, is too abstract, too provincial, and nobody was impressed. So I was thinking, I was trying to understand that situation and thinking what was the problem, why my art was so ignored. And then some nuns became an inspiration for my paintings. So I was criticized as too religious, but I didn't feel any psychological burden because I was aware that in some communities the image of a nun must be disruptive in a way. The market at that time was dominated by left-wing art, so I was out of the mainstream and obsolete in a way, as some of the people said. At that time, I felt that I was not politically correct. At that time, I felt different. I felt alone.
Maybe I was respected for my technique, but I was suspicious because of the topics of my works. This is Sister Faustin's portrait, and to me it was a manifesto. The black figure with some abstract elements. To me, it was a formal discovery. It was a beginning of my conscious artistic strategy. Before, my paintings were abstract, metaphysical, but paradoxically they also did have a topic which I expressed through the titles like Sarmatian abstraction or a coffin. This was a reference to Polish tradition of ash tree coffins and Polish tradition of funeral portraits. So a painting which used to be put next to the coffin was usually a bridge because between the spiritual and the material reality. This is how I wanted to position my paintings between these two worlds. So the painting process became a form of contemplation, maybe also a prayer in the context of the Catholic culture. But this reference was out of fashion back then, and as always, to me it was always clear that the roots of the European art are in religious paintings. So a painter of saints was a archetypical figure to me, which was always close to my heart. And I always tried to resort to spiritual subjects and topics. I also had a series to some living and deceased people who impacted my my art. This was well received by the artistic milieu, so I even was contracted to paint some paintings. This discussion about art and artists was very interesting. Some important institutions, the National Museum in Krakow, bought some of my paintings, and I felt acknowledged and appreciated. So this cycle was well received by critics. Why? Well, because it was an interesting topic with a good technique from the formal point of view. But finally, I just realized, the world just learned to understand my painting, and this didn't happen until I stopped painting nuns and this provincial religiousness, which I think sometimes people fail to understand. So here is what justifies the fact that I'm taking part in this discussion about cancel culture. It's strictly related to woke culture. the culture of the sensitive, enlightened people, very sensitive to social injustice and often offended or harmed. Being sensitive is good. It's not bad. Being sensitive about many forms of oppression, and this is good. It's a good thing that societies are becoming increasingly vigilant about this, but it's easily turned into control. Looking constantly for signs of oppression can become a form of oppression in itself. This is what happens when you try to censor and control art. When you make use of art for the purpose of political correctness. Probably for the woke artists, I'm a beneficiary of the system of oppression. Yes, I am privileged, I'm white, I'm a male, I'm heterosexual. Today's culture likes oppressed groups, so they might not like me, they even might ignore me. But sometimes I think that the fact that I'm Polish cancels all these privileges. If I focus my roots, if I position myself as a Catholic, as a Pole, so I become the pariah of Europe, because I stress the local and I become provincial, I become an outsider of the center, the cosmopolitan capital of art. 10 years, let's move back 10 years into the past before the term cancel culture appeared. So for 10 years now I've been thinking, this culture is so focused on individuality, on claiming and defending the rights of minorities, individuals, etc. So why Poland, my Poland and my Catholic identity can't be part of these identities? Because of its diversity, these identities also should be respected and protected. Poland is a homogeneous country, but it's part of the global culture. We also try to be respectful towards any minorities, be it sexual or others. We've learned that. We've been learning that quite fast. We all watch Netflix. Some of us read poems, poetry, which is always about the individual. So this is a space of respect and comfort we've been trying to build together. But we rule out from it our own identity, our own nationality. This also includes our religious identity. If you're usually an average Pole in the culture milieu in Poland is a left-wing person. So if you are religious, if you stress that, if you're Catholic, you are not well received by the artistic communities in Warsaw, because they think that it won't be liked and welcomed by European milieus. Let me give a good example of an average Pole. So football fans, they are always hooligans, breadwinners, and their families, all of them rolled into one and spoken about disrespectfully. Hooligans, football hooligans. So this is my self-portrait with a football scarf of the Kielce club. Kielce is my family town. No an aspiring artist that would like to join the European elites would ever paint himself with a scarf of a local football club, because if I do that, I become a football hooligan. Of course, this is clearly a provocative painting, because my posture is typical of a Baroque painting. I'm proud of myself here. I'm proud of my country. I'm self-confident. So local tradition, locality, Poland was nothing, never ever is anything to be ashamed of. The Sarmatian tradition is a tradition of quarrels, of conflicts, but also this is the tradition of the Commonwealth of Two Nations. This was a very open country, Poland, in the past, very tolerant, whose citizens were people of the world defending values. So if we frame it like this, Sarmatia would be an example of old-fashioned and backward nobles in the 17th century. So are the football fans today heirs, successors of this tradition? Well, in a way, because they are proud of being Polish. Often I ask myself, who would be the first to fight to defend Poland if we're attacked as Ukraine has been? Is it controversial to turn football fans into a symbol? Maybe, yes. But this today's culture of woke, of the enlightened, does it strip culture of the right to ask questions and stir controversies? If everything is well organized and neat, this is stagnation, no volcano, so that this will lead to no revolution. And art should be a constant revolution, constant questioning and stirring a melting pot, stirring in the melting pot. This is what it should be. These portraits were received as a joke, but then there was a series of some soldiers from the Polish underground army. So this of the cursed soldiers, this led to real anger. The opposition thinks that this is art strictly related to the mainstream narrative of the ruling party. These are Polish heroes, but because of this political context, the opposition would be eager to bury them. But their fate was tragic. They were murdered, slandered, called names, but then they were again rejected as Polish nationalists. In the Russian narrative today, soldiers that defend Ukraine are called fascists. I started painting the cursed soldiers, and the leftists decided that I'm a painter of the ruling party, of the regime, because I respond to their views of what art should look like. And why I paint this? Well, I will tell you. I learned about this dramatic story of the cursed soldiers from the football fans. Yes, they showed me these Polish heroes cancelled by the communists. This was my local. This was a local story which made me think of my childhood when I played with small soldier figures, and then I took a deep interest in the story of the cursed soldiers. This was genuine. This is what I can tell you. This was very emotional to me. And isn't it the most important thing for the woke culture? If something is authentic and genuine, can it be politically correct or not? Will a woke person believe me if I say that for my whole life I've wanted to paint the Polish tradition, the religious tradition, Jesus? I represent the poor community, artistic community of Poland, so I've never been to, let's say, Asia. So I feed on what I know, what I've been able to know. So this is my city, my faith, my friends. My friends are also protagonists of my paintings. My friends, while I talk with them about Malevich, about the purpose of art, the meaning of art. Cultural elites don't like me because of the cycle about the cursed soldiers and the cycle about the Germans. These are anti-fascist pictures, not anti-German. But this is also an ironic comment about the line between the history of Germany and the history of Nazis. Because this way Nazis become an abstract notion that take all the blame for the Holocaust. So if we stress that a Nazi is not a synonym of Germany, this way Germany gets rid of the blame. So the fascists are dead, and paradoxically, the Poles become the greatest fascists today.
So, I'm strongly against when people say about Nazi extermination camps that they were Polish extermination camps. I want to remind you that the Nazis were Germans. And this is how I'm trying to defend my nation, that is very often regarded as anti-Semitic. But, well, the truth is that many Poles creating our culture were of Jewish origin, and even some of the cursed soldiers were Jewish, but this fact goes against the mainstream narrative. I call myself a Polish painter, but I could also call myself a metaphysical painter. However, being a Polish painter, I'm regarding myself as out of the mainstream. Today, many Poles want to be perceived as Europeans, and I'm going against that trend because I'm stressing what is local. For me, it is a strength. Diversity is a value, but is it truly a value when we talk about Catholicism, about being local, according to some people? Maybe the left sees myself as a pro-government artist, but I'm not a politician. I have been doing the same for 30 years during different government administrations. I paint what moves me, and I'm going against the mainstream. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignacy. I'm learning so much about Polish history and Polish art and culture by coming to Warsaw every 2 months. I wrote a piece on Polish modernism for Obeg about 6 months ago, which almost felt like a deep dive into the Polish Second Republic and the art movements that was coming out of Poland between the wars. So I'm kind of relating a lot more to your subject and your exploration as a Polish artist, and it does speak to, I think, beyond Poland. It needs to be shown more widely, and I think that's really important because it's not provincial. It actually is rooted in a sort of a local culture, but I think it will relate to other people too. So thank you. Right, we're going to move to Kaya, and you're going to give a very performative read, I think. So go ahead. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I will not show my works. You can see what I create on my Instagram and my blog. You will not see my works on exhibitions, but that's not what I'm going to talk about today. Today, I invite you to a journey through my cancellation. Here you can see an Instagram post in which my eyes are not visible. This is what a hater wrote about me. A relation why Kaja Shu is a bitchy transphobe. And it's incredible that these haters made a great effort to express this hate towards me and calling me a transphobe. So let me warn you that this will not be a traditional speech, because I found out that it would take me, a couple of hours to recount everything that has happened to me chronologically over the last 3 years. And here, I only got 20 minutes. And I need to speak at a reasonable pace because of our interpreters. Well, I prepared some screenshots from internet, social media. I'm not going to show everything, but if you're interested to see a sample of trying to intimidate me or to destroy my reputation, you can have a look at Instagram, at Ujazdowski, that's the nick, and there is a post with my photo. And there are 192 comments. Some of them are positive. I can see some of my fans, so thanks for coming. But there are also many negative comments with, expressed in strong language. And I've seen numerous examples of such opinions about me, very critical opinions, and I was called a TERF, a transphobe, a pseudo-feminist, a transphobic bitch, and many others. So that is all me, according to the raging mob and its influential leaders. And of course, it's very insulting. In 2020, I would wake up every morning and my phone would vibrate with notifications. It was going into frenzy and shaking with me. I was shaking, I was trembling with fear of what I would see. And my smartphone was trembling because of many notifications. I have since muted all notifications permanently because the sound of them made my stomach twist. And I was getting heart palpitations, so this means a psychological trauma. I've got 32,000 screenshots on my phone, and not all of them are from the so-called the turf wars, as I call them. And also, it is not an easy matter to find what you need in them, and so it's a huge collection. Maybe I will use them in the court in the future. Well. Next slide, next screen. Again, very criticizing, calling me a TERF, a swerve, and a person asking me how can I call myself a feminist, and it's from my public Instagram stories. So someone made a whole Instagram story about myself. Can you imagine that? But now I'm going to read aloud a few of those that used to be my daily routine. Like Kaja Shu is a stinky TERF, and you should shit in her mouth. What is a TERF and why you need to watch out for them? And that was an official post in a series on TERFs by Stonewall. It's an LGBT Polish organization. And I'll show you that afterwards. So they call me a dangerous phenomenon. And a left-wing group says about me that Kaja Shu shitted all over. A woman can have a penis, a transphobe can have her teeth knocked out. So let her choke on her dick into the sack and the sack into the leg. And then Kaja Shu, why are you persecuting minorities? Kaja, stand up, you shit yourself. Is it true that you're transphobe? Are trans women really women? Whoa. And finally, the worst of the narratives. Someone called me take a bath to loosen up a bath of acid. And I'm not joking. Actually, this was actually published on Twitter by a chemistry professor when asked about how to dispose of turf corpses. And, you know, if you read such things and you're called a turf, you are very touched and simply scared. In this way, ladies and gentlemen, the minorities who complained about being the victims finally found someone weaker, me, an influencer who had a mass of hecklers on her head anyway, because she was always doing controversial things by showing like something like unusual bodies of women on her profiles and addressing unpopular topics. So I was an easy target. From, I would say, 2019, I was being hated from a group with about 500 members, and the group was called Kaya Should Get Shit-Faced Again. It was an obsession. But how did it all begin? Why did I suddenly go from being an ally of transgender people, for whom I was tearing my hair out, to being their enemy, to become, and I quote, the country's chief transphobic? So that's me. Well, I was rude, and as they say, I didn't want to apologize for offending anyone, for making someone feel excluded by the word women. Yeah, that's really where it started, from the word women, and that's really curious even to some trans activists, but that's the truth. It all started because of my resistance to using strange inclusive forms every time. So to lynch a woman whose offense was that she refused this one time to use an inclusive substitute for the word women. And that was during the protests of women, the manifestations against the new abortion law. So I was refusing to say a person with a uterus. Just like a year before, my fault was reviewing a book that pro-sex work activists didn't like, and I was also then challenged and called a swerve. So for something equally trivial, I have been called out as a transphobic TERF, and I was a victim of the cancel culture. You know, being cancelled, cancel is not the same as hate. These are, you know, like giving you a bit of a poison every day during months or even years. Give me a moment, please. Let me I will explain in a moment what we can see. Okay, in retaliation for not sweeping the matter under the carpet and washing the dirt on our inclusive rainbow family, but confiding in the national press in the Wysokie Obcasy periodical, my fate was sealed and I was thrown under the pile of petrol. I need to have a bit of water. There was a buzz on social media at that time. We have proved that Kaya Shi was rightly called out as a TERF after all. She gave a transphobic interview. Has anyone repeating about my transphobia even read this interview? I don't think so, because I'm very nice and I'm very sympathetic to the transsexual minority in that interview. However, who would bother to read some stupid interview with a TERF, a transphobe? Well, who? And you could still get infected with transphobia from reading that interview. So without agreeing with me, a couple more women are speaking out in parallel to me, including Urszula Kuczyńska and Katarzyna Szumlewicz. They criticized this non-binary linguistic revolution which was trying to force change in us by means of terror. They draw attention to its dangerously authoritarian character. Together with journalist Krystyna Romanowska, who interviewed us, we hit the official pile. a creature with the ironic name of the LGBT lobby, that's the true name, wrote a petition against us in which they criticized us because of being transphobic. They were persuading to sign that by 1,000 people, including doctors, professors, well-known media figures, and political activists of the left. With an accelerated heartbeat and a shaking hand, I scrolled through the names, and I could even find my friends there who moments earlier were laughing at the madness in the private conversation. Today, they'll clear their name, they're signaling virtue, they are signing against my transphobia, which they know it is not there.
And then it goes on like this. Anarchists were furious about this interview. And as I was nominated to the award of the Bold 2020 by the Wysokie Obcasy Weekly, they were furious and they staged a protest with this sheet you can see in the picture, which says "Fuck TERFs." So they read some claims about cancelling our texts in front of the screen. So it seems that the voice of the TERFs must be stifled because we are the enemies of peace and we are a threat to the democratic Poland and minorities. And this was the atmosphere that was being created around us from the beginning of 2020. Someone even said that we are the plague. Here it says that 2020 is the year where a terrible plague reached Poland apart from COVID. So a plague. They used to say that this is an exclusive language, not empathic, that you shouldn't use this language, but it doesn't apply to TERFs. TERFs should be dehumanized and excluded. Why not? So my haters were dancing around a burning stake, and I was looking at the same faces that kept hating me for a while. They said that this is for the good of humanity, and they say that if it hurts, you asked for it, you deserve it. They call me an idiot. They say I hate this woman. This is what the comments say. And meanwhile, TERF, this term in LGBT circles and progressive left circles becomes something, a common way to offend someone. This is another insulting picture. Months pass by, I have 2 jobs, I have a lot of things on my plate, so in the social media I do what I've always done. This is focusing on self-acceptance, writing poems, uploading pictures of my hairy armpits, advertising to support, to make ends meet because my husband was ill. I was trying not to think about death because every day someone would remind me about the possibility of my death. I was trying not to think about suicide, but it was hard. And more people who support me, stand with me, are lynched because activists are very smart because they hit against me, but also my friends who support me. My friend, influencer, shares my post and again, falls victim of criticism. Why did she dare share a post by a transphobic person? Even my longtime friend apologizes. She says that she can't follow me officially because this is too risky for her. And this it keeps going like this until today. But today, there are more people who stand up to this, who oppose this. But how can you carry out your projects if you are stigmatized, and if you are a persona non grata in the circles you grew up in? Again, this is another comment about me burning at the stake. I was thrown out of the leftist party, the Razem party in Poland. And my left-wing friends apologize, trans people, that they might feel offended, feel hurt. I think they are subject to the terror of political correctness. We can see that they are openly related to what I call the pro-pimping lobbying. This comes from a website called Stop Nonsense. And this is an anti-TERF comment, an insulting one. So my haters become more and more encouraged, and they are coming after me. And you can see here what it says is that working together with transphobes is not worth it. But I'm still respected in some circles, so my haters need to do something really spectacular, because slandering me in the media didn't make me give up. And cancel culture is about destroying you. They have to keep trying. It's not only about the hatred, it's about destroying someone. So then spring comes, and half a year has passed since I was called TERF. And suddenly my dad dies, where this information goes public. I'm weak, I'm vulnerable, everyone knows that, and my hunters can feel that I may prey, and they attack me. They send some lions against me, a very important influencer with a very big media reach. So as a consequences, I lose my job, and a friend of mine as well, she is fired for being a swerve because she had criticized prostitution. The employee of the company doesn't even know what swerve TERF means, but who cares if simply we are being accused of transphobia, which is the worst phobia this season. I could sue them, but I don't have strength anymore to do that, because I'm sick. I lose money. I'm mourning my dad, and haters are dancing over the tomb of my dad. They are laughing at my face in the comments section of my website. I'm already fed up. Some of my friends report the hate activities to the police, so there will be some court trials. I will be also testifying against a hater. In the meantime, there are some successful attempts to withdraw me from some projects which I do without any profit, which is interesting. In the meantime, I'm recovering after my dad's death. I read a lot, and it turns out that we are not alone in Poland, unfortunately. And I have to share this news with my followers, because I feel cheated, lied to by the media, liberal media that I followed and I read very eagerly. And of course, the critics continue to attack me. And whatever I post, they say it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that I'm asking for the criticism. Here, I'm called a a radical. It's a term that can be compared to flat earthers, some senseless radical. Let me just remind you that this whole hatred around myself started with me being a pro-abortionist. Now I'm being called a right-wing radical. Sometimes they marginalize me, they exclude me, and then they are very surprised that I talk to right-wing activists. So they deprive me of the support of the people who are not engaged in these wars. And then they say that only other TERFs support me or only right-wing activists support me. Yes, because these are the only people who will support me because they are not afraid of their criticism. Maya Hebań is one of my is like one of the prominent trans activists, which is a critic of mine. They attack more bloggers and they compare assertive comments with genocide. They attack me. They attack more bloggers, influencers, journalists who interview me. Even media outlets, they usually like objective media outlets such as Oko Press. A few weeks ago, another publishing house got a complaint that I dared advertise their book. They follow the likes, the shares, and they keep looking for more and more ways to make my life harder. If it wasn't about me, I would really struggle to believe that nowadays people can be so mean, so malicious, like bullies in primary school. It says this year TERFs will die, no platform for fuckers and feminism fucks fascists. No person should walk alone. Good news about it is that they can't cancel all of us. They won't kill all of us, although they fantasize about it. There are people cancelled, but they are very supportive of each other, these people subject to cancel activities. A friend in need is a friend indeed. I would say that this is about cancelling, and that the real friends of yours are the courageous ones. And there was this transgender anti-women propaganda that started in 2021 that censors the public discourse, and I think that many people paid for this hate speech with their health and a lot of money, but they didn't give up. I've met many people in a similar situation, and this really brings me hope because we are increasingly becoming more and more immune. They haven't intimidated me. I write a lot now about activism, women's rights, children's rights, and transition, and I do it because now I'm not afraid anymore about saying loudly what is politically incorrect. And let's not be afraid because authoritarianism feeds on fear.
Okay, thank you, Kaya. That was a very moving speech, actually, and having been cancelled myself in 2019, but never did I encounter the level of extreme misogynistic hate language that you have, and it's, yeah, you're obviously a very tough woman, so thank you. We're going to ask questions. I hope, Taravat, you're still with us, and we will then open out to the audience. But I think what's interesting is that we're looking at a kind of range of areas where this new authoritarianism and an old authoritarianism resurfacing. So certainly, when we think about the Polish question, the Polish situation of being pretty much decimated by Nazism, Germans, and by Russians, Soviets, communists, and that history which seems to, dominate Poland so much, and to kind of find a positive Polish national identity seems to be offensive, which is very, I think, jarring from my point of view, and with Taravat, I think the double irony of fighting, Iranians fighting a brutal regime in Iran, but then the voice of very, very small minority of students, 2 students, led to your censorship of your exhibition because they felt deeply pained by some of the language or the work that you were showing. And with Kaya, I think this is probably the burning kind of pertinence thing that's going on in Europe, and where we're not experiencing, when we don't have a regime, attacking us and killing us and executing us, but we are seeing this kind of witch hunt that's going on, which is very, very worrying, because it leads to not only cancel culture and the loss of work and this kind of Maoist-like public shaming of women with a different point of view, and men too, and gay men and lesbians. That the refusal to not listen to other people and to not have a civil discourse is extremely worrying, because I think it can lead to something quite quite horrific. So I really would hope that doesn't happen. Any thoughts from my panel members on the range of presentations and discussions? I think we can open, yes, I think so, because we have, how much time? We've got another 30 minutes. So we have a question at the back there. Let me pass the microphone to you.
Dziękuję. Po polsku, tak można? Tak,
Yes.
to mam
All right.
pytanie.
So my question is as follows. Actually, I've got a couple of questions. I'm thinking about the new authoritarianism, the word, this term, and I think that our current government is authoritarian in Poland. We've got authoritarian regime here in Poland that wants to control the citizens, and people are intimidated here in Poland for art. They are sued to courts on we had even cases in which the police was entering their private apartments through the balconies, and these governments, the current government in Poland, has a tendency towards censorship, and talking in Poland about excluding the Catholics is a vast exaggeration. I understand the frustrations of artists that before were marginalized and now they can make money. However, when someone puts a rainbow and a saint, and it means problems with the police and with the justice system, and it's simply not fair talking that the Catholics are oppressed in Poland. How do you perceive that? How do you feel about organizing such a debate in a country that in fact is becoming authoritarian and is more and more oppressive towards its citizens? Are you living in the same reality? Can you tell the truth about the situation in our country? Of course, it's very interesting what has been said about the cancel culture, and I think it's extremely important, and of course we should discuss about that. But I'm just thinking about the place, this very place, to organize this discussion, because when we talk about transphobia, the government co-finances these debates, but this government is very transphobic indeed. but Kaya is at the other extreme. So I'm just wondering about this cancel culture in that specific context. What about ideas of our government? So thank you. I think it's an open question, maybe to Kaya. Thank you.
To znaczy bycie.
Well, being, a victim of oppression taught me one thing. One should never become intolerant. We should be tolerant towards any kind of diversity. I can give an interview to any paper. I can even speak in a church, being an atheist. In Canada, Deborah is very gender critical, criticizes the transgender ideology, and she speaks in churches. So, when you are oppressed, you should be everywhere and speak with everyone, because you never know when the next opportunity will appear. Then about my dad. My dad was an artist. At the end of his life, even being a Buddhist, he was a very right-wing. And I visited this very Center for Contemporary Art many times with him. So it's a very emotional moment to me that I can be here. Because I know this place very well. I visited this place many times, and I know that it's co-financed by the government. So if you condemn me for being in this place because it's co-financed by the government, I think we just don't understand each other. And now talking about the Law and Justice governing party and the transphobia, well, how can I tell you? Transphobia does not exist. It's imaginary, and it's targeted at silencing people. So that's my opinion. As regards financing, etc., I don't have any problem with that. I voted for the left, I voted for the liberals, but frankly speaking, I'm not going to vote them again after what happened to me. My political views changed because I'm looking at actions. Words don't matter to me. I'm looking at actions. And if somebody, paints a rainbow next to the Virgin Mary, I don't agree with that. Why should I insult religious people? We cannot insult or offend anyone. And the left wants actually to introduce another kind of discrimination. So for me, it's voting for the left. It's not a solution. Okay, here in Poland we have a right government, but if I imagine the left being in power, I would probably be in jail. I would be behind bars because of what I publish. I'm a simple influencer, a simple blogger. And yet I'm so much criticized, and your perspective changes when you are being oppressed. And now I'm like in the center. I'm not left or right wing. I'm very much in the center. If I could say something.
I don't need the microphone. Actually, thank you for your question, and I can sense your inner fire and concern. What I observe looking from different perspectives and from the experience I had in Britain, I have an impression that we're heading to a global authoritarian system, and in a sense we are in the process where we are divided between ourselves, because it's very easy to divide people. Because psychologically we have certain tendencies. So there might be tendency to being open, over-tolerant almost, like until you experience yourself something, you consider something not a threat. So let's say not experiencing walking in majority Muslim neighborhood where there are Orthodox Muslim men in the street and women are at home. You don't know what it means walking down the street, even though you are dressed in trousers and you're not showing anything. then if you talk with someone that haven't experienced that, they would tell you that you are Islamophobic, you are racist, and so on and so forth, because they didn't have this experience. So we're heading towards this kind of a global hegemony where whatever we base on our experience or wherever we want to ask questions, we are shoved down the pipeline that we are extreme. You are not allowed to ask questions. And we're heading in this direction that, let's say, in a lot of Western countries, it's usually the left that pushes for this authoritarian regime. Your experience is from here, right? And don't be fooled that it wouldn't go even further under the left. So therefore, with the experience of what I was showing with Passion for Freedom, focus on individual, focus on asking questions, and look for people, no matter what party or presumed left or right, but are they really standing up for freedom, for allowing people to ask questions? And if you think that in Poland this law is so extreme, in Britain a man made a prank. He put the bacon on the handles to a mosque. He was put in prison, and he mysteriously died in prison, and there was no investigation what happened to him. No investigation. There is a huge radicalization in prisons in Britain, Islamic radicalization. Nobody knows what happened to him. You're not allowed to do anything. So we're heading into this kind of direction that on the global scale, just don't open your mouth, shut up, go to work, pay your taxes, don't you dare asking questions. And the trend in the West is that at first, if you were asking questions about everything, like very high immigration and the wages going lower and lower for the citizens of the country, you are racist, don't ask questions. Then you started asking questions about the policies introducing climate change, taxation, over-taxation, and different policies where you don't actually know where this money is from. And looking at different politicians in different countries, quite often they invest money in these businesses and so on and so forth. If you started asking questions, you deny the science. It's like a religion. It's not science that keeps looking for answers and changes with new answers being found. No, it's the science, like religion. You are far right. You started asking questions. Now we had Rosie Parker being in Australia. Before she got there, they started whipping up the frenzy in the media that she's far right, she's a Nazi, don't allow her to come to this country. She was physically attacked. If not the police coming at the last moment, they would trot her to death. They wanted to pull her down and walk all over her. So I wouldn't be fooled. It's going for all of us. Because there would be one day that you ask the wrong question and they will come for you. And left, right, doesn't matter. This is all just a cover. They're dividing us and making sure that we don't talk to each other. We don't have these conversations. I might have differences with her on certain issues, but I allow her to speak. I allow her to even have an argument with me about that because I respect her. I respect that she's got a different opinion. And there's so many countries that this boundary is being pushed and pushed. And Poland is really not the worst. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any more thoughts? Or anyone want to ask anything? We have a chap over there at the back.
I have a question to our guest from San Francisco. Hello. I have a question about around 2016, there was a media campaign in the United States, including an image of a woman wearing a hijab in the colors of United States flag. Maybe you remember this. And it was presented to the public as a symbol of feminism and emancipation. And a lot of feminists was embracing this image and even repeating this, wearing this themselves. And what was your opinions on this campaign?
Oh, sorry, we need to... Taravat, we can't hear you.
Microphone on.
Microphone, thank you.
Yeah.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
I'm so glad you asked that question because that image did not sit well for me when it was used for the Obama campaign. That's why it was used, primarily for Obama's election and in conjunction to women's freedoms and rights. Can't remember the name of the artist. Oh, he's the one that did all the obey signs. But trying to remember his name. It's on the top of my head. Anyways, I have issues with his work in general anyway, but that image, I remember I had a friend who actually got me the t-shirt with that image, and I ended up giving it away to somebody else because I really felt that it was problematic. Because it suggested this normalcy and normalizing of wearing the hijab within the United States, having the and having it be a part of a political campaign. And something that I've always really learned and have had, I guess, internal battles with is the issue of church and state within the United States, and how that has implemented certain rules and guidelines that I actually have never really been in line with. So again, I'm really glad that you asked that question, because that image I was actually quite against, and that is around the same time that I was finishing my work around blasphemy. And that was the time when I was actually working against the hijab, and I actually continue to make work about that. And a lot of my friends, Iranians, both women and also in the queer communities, were also really opposing that image. And we're not using the posters, we're not supporting the image. But at that time, there was just so much political energy around the elections, and the fact that we had a black, a black candidate for presidency, and everybody was just so, how can I say, we have a terminology here, drinking the Kool-Aid, okay? It's like everybody was drinking the Kool-Aid of, yeah, this is really great, and not really being focused on, wait a minute, we're normalizing this, and this is still actually a whole other level of how women should look, how women should dress, and being very timid and being very not having really the right to really freedom of speech. Now, it is my personal belief that I would rather have a woman choose what she wants to wear when she wants to wear it. And I think that image, as I do understand, it wants to bring a sense of like, we are a community, we can invite people from different cultures and religions to kind of come together. But the way I saw it is, here is this white, privileged American man who's using an image of a woman and a hijab and using the colors of the flag to kind of normalize it. So I still to this day am against that imagery. But at the same time, like, I don't want to, I haven't really been able to have a conversation about this until right now. So again, I really appreciate your question around that image.
Great, thank you. And that shows the importance, I think, of conversations and dialogue. I would be against the censorship of the Virgin Mary with a rainbow over her, because I don't believe in artistic censorship, or I don't believe in the stifling of freedom of expression, even though it might be disagreeable. And so I hope that's not going to go further in terms of the law intervenes on such actions. And any more questions? We have about 10 more minutes, I think. Yes. Someone at the back? Yeah, the man with the hat.
Więc ja mam pytanie do pani.
I have a question to the person who asked a question before. The question to you is, why do you have so much aggression in you? Because your question was very aggressive, and I think that we are on the same side here, and I think that in general, in the modern world, we should respect each other. My grandmother is totally right-wing, and she has a whole right to do it. Should I say to her that she's stupid? Do you agree with me? Because I think that usually we need to excuse ourselves for the fact that we have different views and tastes, that someone has a different opinion. Why should I need to justify it or explain it to others? So I'm asking, where is this aggression coming from in the people if someone simply is of a different opinion? Everyone needs to be wiser, and maybe I misunderstood your intentions, but my colleague and I, we have decided that it was put in a very aggressive way. So I'm interested with what you can tell me about it. Thank you for saying, Anna, that I wasn't aggressive, but I think that this is a very interesting case of speaking about emotions in the context of very of different situations, be it political, artistic. You've talked about this experience, Kaya, of being cancelled, which made you see certain things in a different way, and this triggers certain emotions in you to the extent that my question also provoked very strong emotions. And I think that people who have the experience of problems with the functioning of certain institutions and states see these things differently from people who have never had this experience. So I agree that certain feelings or sexual orientations shouldn't be a subject of political aggression, especially for in aggressive terms. But if we all face aggression, experience aggression, we are exposed to it, and these emotions just are released. So my answer was emotional. I'm sorry if you perceived this as aggressive. I simply don't agree with how the current government speaks about the image of Poles. And I think that it's worth talking about it, and that's why I've asked this question. I hope that this answers your question. Sorry, unfortunately, it's off mic. Please don't feel attacked. That wasn't my intention. I'm also a sensitive person. But there's a difference between being sensitive and being emotionally intelligent. Therefore, at a certain age, you should be able to control your emotions, because this is the definition of maturity. And I think that we are all too emotional, too sensitive about ourselves. And people in general, not only in Poland, are emotionally immature. And this is a global problem. So should we be driven by emotion or maybe by common sense? This is a general question. Widzę, że jeden z prelegentów chce zabrać głos. So I'm not going to be emotional now. I'm going to be logical. I don't think my words were in any way aggressive or insulting or exclusive. You asked a question which brings this emotional logic. You were the person who brought the emotional logic.
Just make a remark. Thank you for actually having this conversation. I think it's really great that we can not only have conversation between the audience and the panelists, but also between ourselves. And that was the aim of actually having this series of discussions. Excuse me. So this is great. I think in general for all of us, it's worth to just be mindful that when we talk about issues that are difficult and complex, and I think this is important to stress, that the issues we're talking about, they're not easy and simple and black and white. It's very easy for emotions to arise, and it's a huge art form in itself to actually be able to work with these emotions that arise and how we deal with them and how we process them and how we still try to communicate and honor each other and allow each other to speak. So I think both of you actually were great. I don't think you have anything, you know, really against each other. It's actually perfect and great for our conversation. So thank you for that.
Also, let me add a point here. I agree, if something touches you personally, you might become very emotional. So maybe trans people who are attacking me or their friends, when they say that this touches them personally because they had suffered from discrimination, they say that because of that they have the right to take it against me because I symbolize this evil. Well, that's right. That it's often the case that when you experience something, you feel you want to take revenge. You want to vent it off against someone else. I don't think you are aggressive. Maybe you are stressed because speaking here loud in public might be a bit stressful. And I feel a bit of fact. So maybe if I were woke, I might say that I felt offended. My feelings were hurt. But we really have to bear in mind that we have to be rational and logical to be able to talk despite all the differences in our opinions. The whole Center of Contemporary Art is sponsored by the Polish ruling party. But the very case that you've come here and we are talking about it undermines this authoritarian air around the ruling party. And under this ruling party, in this very center, a great space has been created, even praised by international artists, that this is actually an example, an exception in Europe that cancelled or excluded artists, excluded because of transphobia or for other reasons, can come here and feel free. You might not like the ruling party, the Law and Justice Party. You might be very negative about them, but you need to also take a more commonsensical look, a rational look, that the director of the center is open towards people who are rejected because of political correctness. And as a consequence, we are able to hold this debate. So this way we avoid this black and white, us against them approach. Let me also add a point to what you said, because in a part you made a reference to me. I don't feel I'm an artist that has risen to fame now during the Law and Justice rule. I've been an artist since 1994. I'm a well-known artist and a illustrator. I've drawn many books for children. I've made drawings for newspapers and weeklies. So I haven't appeared out of nowhere now. I'm a right-wing person. Since 1995 in Krakow, in the old town in Kazimierz, we've been running a free-from-profit gallery, which is managed by artists purely, and we only exhibit art regardless of the views or opinions. We are open to all opinions, like Sarmatia used to be in the past. No exceptions here. If we like the works of an artist, we don't ask whether he's a left-wing, he's a left-wing person or a right-wing person. And this is humanity. You don't divide people into black and white, and we are all human beings. We are in Warsaw, which is a city that had been destroyed by Germany, by the Germans. Manick, you've mentioned the Nazis, but they are not aliens. They were Germans, not only Germans, also the Dutch, the German SS forces. With also other European nations, the Dutch were also perpetrators, and now they are lecturing us about how we should be, and we are one of the oldest democracies in Europe, maybe the oldest one.
Wow, that was a really amazing and fantastic discussion. We have run out of time. It's 8:30, and the technicians have to wrap up. So I'm very sorry if people have still got burning questions that we can't take anymore, I'm afraid. We can't, can we? Yeah. Because we have to wrap up. So I really want to thank you all. I'm not going to give a long ending, just to say thank you to the Ujazdowski Castle for giving us this platform for these discussions. Very important discussions, and I think it's very rare. So having this diversity of thought and opinion and being able to listen and disagree civilly is really important. So I want to thank Taravat Talepasand, all the way from San Francisco. Good luck with your exhibition opening on the 13th, I believe. I wish I was in San Francisco to see it, but please post lots of pictures up on social media. And please do follow Taravat on Instagram. I would like to thank Kaya. It moved me terribly, and I think it's important that people hear your story. And I hope that people will listen, and there will be kind of greater civility towards you and to everyone else. It's so important that we have that sense of not being afraid and able to just like have a conversation. Ignacy, I would say, fantastic delivery. I think your work is really interesting. I look forward to seeing it tomorrow. And I think, yes, you make a very important point about the sense of, patriotism that is not, it's not extreme. It's not, extreme nationalism. It's actually a very, important and valid kind of position to have. So thank you for that, and your work looks amazing. Agnieszka, thank you for being my co-chair, and I was certainly in the minority for the first time on language-wise, because we've had a Polish majority guest speakers here, which is fantastic, and I hope that we'll have more. So if you know of any good people that will be happy to kind of come and talk and have these burning debates, discussions, please fire their names to us. Thank you all for coming, being such a wonderful audience and such a participatory audience. And I wish we could go on longer. So good night, and see you at the next one, I hope. Thank you, Taravat. Thank you.